Have you ever ventured into a new environment, excited for new beginnings and new experiences, only to find yourself trapped in a living nightmare? In this spine-chilling tale, we'll follow the harrowing journey of a young woman who finds herself in a new place, only to be terrorized by a haunting presence that threatens to destroy everything she holds dear. Will she be able to escape the clutches of the vengeful spirit that lurks in the shadows of her new surroundings? Or will she become the next victim in a never-ending cycle of terror? Join us on this journey of fear and suspense to find out. As a recent graduate from an acting school, I was thrilled to have landed a role in the upcoming play at one of the oldest theaters in town. Joining the theater group as a young actress, I was eager to showcase my skills and learn from the experienced members. From the very first day, I was warmly welcomed by the group and felt at home in the theater. As rehearsals began, I felt a sense of excitement and nervousness as I prepared for my minor role in the play. We practiced late into the night, but the hard work and dedication of everyone involved was truly inspiring. As the first night of rehearsal came to an end, I stayed behind to help clean up and ensure that all the props were in their proper place for the next day's performance. But little did I know that this was just the beginning of a haunting experience that I would never forget. The old theater was eerily quiet, and I had a constant sensation that someone was watching me. As I meticulously worked my way through the props, my heart was beating fast with every passing moment. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed through the theater, startling me. I spun around to see what had caused the noise, only to find a pair of red high heels lying on the center of the stage. I picked up the heels, and as I did, a feeling of dread began to take hold of me. My eyes scanned around, and that's when I saw her, a floating figure in a red dress near the studio lights. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but as I looked again, the figure had vanished. A wave of fear washed over me, and I couldn't wait to leave the theater. The thought of being alone with that ghostly presence was too much for me to bear. When I walked towards the makeup room to pick up my bag, I heard the sound of a lady softly weeping. The sound was so heart-wrenching that it sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't help but felt a deep sense of sadness and despair that washed over me. The tears in her voice sounded like they were a lifetime in the making, as if they were the manifestation of years of heartbreak and disappointment. The sadness in the theater was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel as though the weight of all that sorrow was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. As I stood outside the door, I could hear the sound of muffled sobs getting louder. It was as if someone was crying their heart out, and the thought of walking in on someone in such a vulnerable state made me hesitate even more. My heart was racing, beating like a drum in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I slowly pushed the door open, bracing myself for what I might find inside. To my surprise, the room was empty, no one was there, and yet, the sound of crying continued. I searched around the room, looking for any clues as to where the sound was coming from, but there was nothing out of place. The sadness in the air was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I turned to leave, I saw a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, but again, there was nothing there. I quickly grabbed my bag and left the theater. The experience left me shaken and frightened, and I couldn't stop thinking about it even after I left. The next day, I tried to put the incident behind me and focus on the upcoming show, but the memory of the floating figure lingered in my mind. The fear that gripped me was like nothing I had ever experienced before. My heart raced as I tried to process what I had seen the previous night. The image of the floating figure and the red heels haunted my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The old theater felt different, as if it held secrets and mysteries that I couldn't begin to understand. When I arrived at the theater for the actual show, my anxiety heightened as I realized the red heels were missing. I searched high and low for them, but they were nowhere to be found. I asked around, but no one had seen them. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. I was convinced that something sinister was at play, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As the performance began, my nerves were already frayed, but when I saw the floating figure again, I was overcome with terror. It was as if the figure was taunting me, teasing me with its presence. My legs felt like they were made of lead, and I struggled to maintain my composure. Every time I looked towards the studio lights, I could see the figure out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked directly at it, it vanished into thin air. I was convinced that everyone else in the theater could see the figure too, but to my surprise, they seemed oblivious to its presence. It was as if I was the only one being tormented by this apparition. My minor role on stage suddenly seemed like the most daunting task I had ever undertaken, and I couldn't wait for the performance to be over. The fear that consumed me was overwhelming, and I couldn't help but wonder what kind of dark secrets the old theater was hiding. It wasn't until later that I discovered the reason behind the strange occurrences in the theater. The janitor, who had been working there for many years, told me the story of a young actress who had been promised the lead role in a play if she spent the night with the director. However, once she had done so, the director went back on his promise, and the actress was so devastated that she hanged herself while dressed in a red dress on the studio light pole above the stage. It was exactly the spot above the red heels where I have found them. There were several other strange incidents that occurred after the young actress's death. During rehearsals, props would collapse and studio lights would fall down without any apparent reason. But the most eerie incident was the sudden death of the director who had taken advantage of the young actress. He had died of a heart attack, and some said that it was as if he had seen something unbelievable just before he died. It was believed that the ghost of the young actress had finally caught up with him. All of these events added to the already creepy atmosphere of the theater, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease every time I stepped foot in the building. One night after a late rehearsal, I encountered the red dress ghost once again. I was packing up my things when I heard someone walking on the stage. Assuming it was one of my fellow actors, I turned to greet them, but to my horror, no one was there. I froze in terror, unable to move, as the footsteps grew louder and closer. Suddenly, the sound stopped, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I felt a cold breeze brush past me. I turned around and saw the floating figure of the young actress in the red dress standing right in front of me. Her face was filled with disappointment and sadness, and I could feel her despair seeping into my bones. From that moment on, I knew that I could not continue with the play, and I quit the group the next day. Despite the fact that the play had ended and the old theater had been abandoned for years, people still talked about the red dress ghost that haunted the place. Some say they've seen her floating on the stage, while others have heard her footsteps echoing in the empty halls.